going forward so folks can access it. So I'm going to say welcome again. We appreciate you joining us for this public meeting concerning the 2023 City of Clearwater Parks and Recreation Master Plan update. Again, I'm Andrea Ostradka, the project manager for the team, and I'm here with Isabella Delgado Castillo, Lakeisha Dunbar, and Christine Dalton with Dalton Studios. As I was saying a moment ago, this is intended to be a living document. So this is a snapshot in time with our findings and recommendations. But what you'll see is that the city has been tremendously productive in advancing parks and recreation programs and facilities and in responding to community needs. So as they do that and celebrate successes with the community, that staff is always really active and moving on to the next things on the list. We have a presentation for you today, and then we're going to open it up to question and answer discussion. This is intended to represent the findings in a draft of the plan. The plan will be finalized in January when it's presented to council, and then staff will use it to guide the decision-making process. We do have a chat feature. You should have an icon at the bottom of your screen, and Lakeisha already put a message in the chat, and I just want to say you're welcome to keep cameras on or turn them off. Sometimes signal is better when cameras are off, so some people find it better to do that way, but we're okay either way. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you want to share information, you can put it in the chat, or we will open it up to discussion afterwards. We do have members of the City of Clearwater's Parks and Recreation Department staff with us today. We appreciate Mike and Mark being here. And with that, we'll roll into the plan. So I'm going to turn it over to Isabella.
Okay, can everybody hear me and see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, amazing. Let's move everyone's beautiful faces. Okay. Again, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I know that everyone on the project team and everyone here who has touched the project in some capacity over the past couple of months is really excited to finally be able to present to you what we've been working on for the city for the last couple of months. So first, I'm going to briefly introduce exactly what the Parks and Recreation Master Plan is and why it's being updated. Then we'll talk about the community outreach and engagement that was really central through really this entire process. And I'll go over some of the findings that inform the final plan, the recommendations, the action items, and finally, Christine will go over historic preservation, arts, and culture report, and how that really supplemented the Clearwater Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So plan introduction, the City of Clearwater's Parks and Recreation Master Plan it's a document that outlines the city's vision for how the Parks and Recreation system is going to grow. It's a living document, like Andrea said, so it's meant to be updated as projects are completed and needs or wants in the city's change. The plan update really is an opportunity for us to assess all the things that the city and department are currently doing. And spoiler alert, like Andrea said, the City of Clearwater Parks and Recreation program is really truly exceptional and already provides very high quality services. So our job was really to identify what remains to be improved or built upon. The last master plan update was in 2003. So in this plan, we looked at what has been accomplished in the past 10 years, and what has changed, what are the next steps to make sure that we continue to grow in a good direction for the next 10 years. So the process of creating this new plan was broken up into tasks that the project team, completed to really make sure that we got a very thorough understanding of how the parks and recreation system was functioning within Clearwater, and get a good sense of what the residents of Clearwater wanted from their Parks and Recreation Department. This included an analysis of existing conditions, conducting public engagement, really at every step of the process. We're working with the city to develop a long-term vision for the Parks and Rec system, establishing how to best implement recommendations, before finally kind of combining all of this into the final plan document that we're discussing today. And community engagement. So community engagement was really central to the development of the plan, and we made sure to include it at every step of the process. Our goal was really to include as many people, communities, and entities within Clearwater to make sure that the final document really reflected, the desires and the needs of the residents of the city. These three engagement goals that you see on the screen are really what guided us as we developed actions to really make sure that the community was involved in every step of the way. And this is a process that, by the way, is continuing today now with all of you that are joining us today in this meeting. The engagement process was made up of a variety of actions. Each one was meant to be an opportunity to provide a different way for people to engage. These included 3 in-person community workshops, which was followed up by interviews with stakeholders in the community. A public website was created to provide information to the public about the project, and which hosted an interactive online input map, and then also our online survey. So we hosted 3 in-person community workshops in Clearwater the week of July 24th. These were held at the Greenwood Recreation Center, the Clearwater Main Library, and the Long Center. These were all held at different locations on different days and varying times. And this was done to hopefully allow as many people who wanted to participate with the opportunity of attending one of the workshops. And the purpose of these workshops was really to introduce residents to the project and for us to learn about what they valued in a park system, and especially what we should be paying attention to as we work to develop this plan. So, in order to learn what residents valued, we had a couple activities in these workshops. We collected comment cards. They asked for feedback and preferences for the parks and facilities and amenities. They asked for likes, dislikes, what residents would like to see. We had tablets that allowed people to fill in their online survey, a dot board that collected preferences for different amenities, fields, programs. And then we also had a drawing activity for kids to keep them engaged. But of course, if they wanted to participate in the other activities, they were more than welcome to share their perspective. And then we also had a Spanish interpreter just to reduce any potential barriers to participation. And this is what the dot boards look like at the end of the workshop. We had 4 different boards with different categories of options. We had ones for recreation facilities, amenities, sports facilities, programming, and participants were basically given sticky dots, and you were instructed to place them on the square option that you thought should be a priority moving forward. And then on the slide, you can see what the top 3 priorities by board category were. These including gymnasium and walking, biking trails for recreational facilities, or basketball courts and indoor courts for sports facilities. And then in addition to the boards, we also collected over 54 comment cards, and that was over the course of the 3 workshops. We collected responses in English and Spanish, and the Spanish ones, we then translated them. Some of the common themes that we found in these cards were the importance of having enough indoor facilities. People really mentioned that, because of the weather, sometimes it gets really hot. There can be a lot of thunderstorms. Sometimes there's not enough shade. Indoor facilities really help. And especially we had basketball courts, indoor basketball courts were highlighted a lot in these comments. And then we also had comments about wanting to see more investment in sustainability and preservation, as well as offering potentially more arts and cultural programming. Then another activity that we had the workshop mentioned before was the tablet to take the online survey. But this online survey was available for anyone to take. It was uploaded to the city website in early July, and it was up there through mid-August, so for more than a month. This survey was purposely designed to be concise as possible. That way as many people could get their thoughts and feedback to us without taking too much time out of their day. And we had a really, really great response rate. We had about 626 fully complete survey responses, 91 partial ones, which is a really great response. And here are just some very brief highlights from the survey. The majority of people thought the recreational card fees were reasonable. Roughly a third of them were unaware of the card benefits, and a little bit more than half thought it was easy to access information about the recreation events and programs. And this was something that popped up in a couple of other places that people really wanted to hear more about all the really great things that were being offered and that were happening by the Parks and Rec Department. And these are some of the parks and facilities that people visit the most according to the survey. Coachman Park, Crest Lake Park, etc. And then we also asked for priorities for the future for facilities preserving and increasing green natural spaces, as well as having more walking and biking trails was something that was really valued by survey respondents. And then for programming, adult activities and arts and culture programs were something that was also really received a lot of votes as a very high priority for the future. And then lastly, we really wanted to highlight the results for the top 3 community priorities. These are quality of life and having access to parks and recreation facilities, followed by having access to restrooms and water fountains, so like comfort amenities, and then finally having lots of great programming and events. And just wanted to say that all these actions were very successful, the survey, the workshop, and we just want to say that want to say thank you to everyone who was able to participate in any of these activities. We hope you see your comments reflected in the final plan. And then apart from the community workshops, we also held stakeholder interviews. These were held in July and September. They were an opportunity to identify significant issues, needs, and priorities for the Parks Department. They were held with city departments and boards, as well as co-sponsors. On the slide, you can see some of the departments and organizations that were generous enough to meet with us. And again, huge thank you for their participation and very valuable insight. And these are some very high level highlights from these interviews. They include some, but certainly not all of our major takeaways. The big takeaway that we got, which we mentioned before, was really how outstanding the Parks and Recreation Department is. There's excellent programming, really top tier rec centers, and the offerings are really inclusive and diverse. And stakeholders also noted that the parks and the beach are really generally maintained to a very high standard. They also noted that it would be a good idea to consider allocating additional resources for beach maintenance, mostly during like holidays or major events, increasing the maintenance budget in general, and improving comfort by having, and especially for park visitors, by having more shade through trees, increasing art access to some parks would be really welcome, and so would more public art. So the next step of the process was really to evaluate the parks and rec system through some different lenses, and we completed various analyses to do this. This included a demographic analysis, a performance evaluation of parks and facilities, a site visit where we actually went to Clearwater, and a review of existing guiding documents just to make sure that the plan that we were developing aligned with any goals that were previously established for the parks and rec system. And this section just kind of offers a very high level overview of what we found and how we did that. So first of all, again, biggest takeaway that we found is that the Parks and Rec system is already pretty exceptional. And in the decade since the last 2013 plan, that decade has been extremely productive. Facilities have been renovated, a new signature park, Coachman Park has opened, just to name a couple of things. And here on the slides are some of the many facilities and programs that the department currently offers, and that has really, maintained to a very high standard. And so we quickly realized that the goal of this plan update was more to identify how an already strong park system could be strengthened. And things are working really well. Service and communication with the Parks Department is very positively viewed. Facilities are well used and visited and maintained with a lot of care. So our job was to identify, what areas might need some additional investment, what things, that are already being done very well might need to be adjusted to reflect changing needs and contexts. With things like demographic changes and, just being prepared for maybe future weather, establishing resiliency, and things like that. So to begin the process, we started by looking at the previous Parks and Recreation Plan and city's current guiding documents. We looked at documents like Green Print 2.0, the Clearwater Downtown Redevelopment Plan, Imagine Clearwater, and any previous community engagement efforts. And so we did this because we want to locate areas and needs that have already been identified and want to make sure that the plan update aligns with already established goals. And some common themes that we found during this document review that we made sure to include in our plan update was, for example, centering equity as a really foundational guide to the whole plan, and really making sure that access to these incredible facilities and programs is offered to as many people as possible, and then making sure that the offerings respond to the needs of diverse communities. We have making sure that the park system is resilient, that it helps improve the overall resilience of the whole city. And then finding ways to connect the downtown and waterfront was something that came up in a lot of documents, increasing cultural programming, creating more ways for people to get around Clearwater, especially through active mobility, like walking or biking, was something that came up a lot. And then lastly, it became really clear that there's really strong pride in the natural beauty of Clearwater, and centering and protecting the many natural spaces in the city is really important. So after completing the document review, we completed a demographic trends analysis, and this was just done to identify and really find how Clearwater is growing and changing, because we want to make sure that the park system continues to grow with the city, and that this plan helps that happen. And especially make sure that the department is able to provide its really high level of service many years into the future. Sure, it's no surprise, but the population of Clearwater has increased over the past 10 years, roughly by 7% to over 116,000 residents, 25% of which are 65 years or older. The population has also grown slightly more racially and ethnically diverse. And the share of residents who speak Spanish at home has actually increased to 12%. And an interesting statistic, about 1 in 10 households in Clearwater don't own a car. In areas around downtown Clearwater, that number is actually around 3 to 4 in every 10 households. And identifying trends like this really help us plan for the future and help decide how to best, what kind of guidelines to help give to best allocate resources to make sure that residents have access to programs and facilities throughout Clearwater. This was followed by an evaluation of the park system. This included an analysis of park and facility visits, of visitors and the distribution of park and facilities, and then all the outputs which you can see on the slide. Here the park visit analysis. Here are some of the outputs from our park visit analysis. Our evaluation included analysis by park type, visits by time of day and day of week, and then park visitor trip origins, park visitor demographics. And its purpose was really to identify the popularity of different parks over time. And then we also looked at where park facilities were distributed throughout the city. A major goal of the plan is to ensure that the Parks and Rec system continues to grow equitably. And this kind of analysis where we look at where things are located, distribution of facilities near schools, by household income, et cetera. It really allows us to identify areas that might have service gaps and that might need additional investment. So we looked at facilities like rec centers, playgrounds, outdoor basketball courts, and even shade structures, that was really cool. And then this evaluation, and then we completed a site visit evaluation. It was done by an in-person team. So we visited the site. We visited over 69 parks and facilities. It says 99 on the slide, but it's 69 parks and facilities. Each site was documented with photographs, and we did a detailed evaluation. In the form, we've noted things like ADA, if the location felt safe, how cleanly things were. And then we use the scores not to create a best to worst list, but just to get a general sense of what aspects of the park system are really working well and what areas might need some improvement, or if anything is missing. Recommendations. So then we used all the information that we gathered during the community engagement process, all that feedback that we received through the surveys, the website, the workshops, and as well as our own evaluation of the sites and facilities to create a list of recommendations that really are very broad, and the purpose is really to allow the city to also respond to changing contexts, etc. So these recommendations included improving access to sports, courts and fields, and this is mostly done by our suggestions mostly by allocating dedicated days and hours per day for free use of the facilities, so not having to pay to use them, increasing the number of park attendants, especially at parks with amenities like restrooms or community buildings, because we found that usually they're locked and they need someone to unlock them before they can be used. And then creating a more consistent beautification and landscaping throughout the city, and especially suggesting using rewilding or xeriscape strategies to help make sure that costs are kept low, water usage can be reduced, and to help support the local ecosystem. We also recommended beginning to plan for electrification. And then we had various community and stakeholder responses point out the importance of beach cleanliness during holiday and special events, which I noted previously, but really only during peak times. So we recommended increasing resources during seasonal major events. And then we also recommended increasing comfort amenities. And this mostly is by prioritizing the most visited parks in the city, and especially the ones with playgrounds and outdoor courts. And in order of importance, really prioritizing shade structures, then seating, water fountains, and then trash cans at these locations. And then at the community workshop and at the survey, we heard a lot about having more indoor basketball courts and the difficulty of practicing outdoors due to severe weather. Sometimes there's no restrooms or water fountains. So the city actually currently has 22 basketball courts, of which 10 are indoor courts, which is more than national guidelines recommend. So our recommendation is a two-prong approach. One is to first, increase comfort amenities like shade, structures, seating, water fountains, and restroom access at the locations where residents have pointed out that there is need, especially near these outdoor basketball courts. And the second is to coordinate with club sponsors to make sure that there is a set time or day of the week where there's access to those existing indoor basketball courts. And then for beach accessibility, the recommendation just mostly deals with coordinating to make sure the installation beach mats of Clearwater is well supported. And then for additional restrooms, we again recommended prioritizing high-use parks located within each of the quadrants in the city, and especially prioritizing ones that have playground, outdoor courts, and increasing access, again, by making sure we have more park attendance. Then it's also recommended to add kayak launches, and we specifically recommended at Bay Park and Sand Key at the barrier islands. And we also recommended increasing the tree canopy in park areas. A comment that we heard a lot throughout the process is Clearwater has many beautiful places, but it'd be nice to enjoy them under some shade. So we suggested added more trees along trails and sidewalks, and especially near benches, fitness, and play equipment. And then also intergenerational programming. There's very cool clubs like shuffleboard, horseshoe, and lawn bowling that want to expand their membership. And so promoting partnerships between schools, seasonal youth programs, and the activity clubs would really help expand. And then lastly, for the beach event programming, our recommendation is just to continue to work with partners to promote special events and to consider pairing events between the beach and the downtown to really strengthen that connection. Suggestions include a peer-to-peer walk-run event and a simultaneous concert and art festival. So the main document of the Parks and Recreation, the master plan update that we're working on, concludes with an action plan. And this basically has a list of proposed projects and actions. Some of these come directly from the recommendations we just talked about, and others are existing ongoing projects. These capital improvement projects that you see here all support needs expressed by participants in the community engagement process and align with the recommendations. So on this slide is a summary list of the types and kinds of projects that you would find in the action plan. They include projects like renovating parks and facilities, like the Clearwater Beach Recreation Center, the aquatic facilities, Bay Care Ballpark, repaving trails, completing other trail projects, and replacing basketball, tennis, and racquetball courts that have already previously been renovated but now have deteriorated past the point of renovation, need to be replaced. It also includes expanding the Enterprise Dog Park and Crest Lake Park, expanding pool access hours, which is something that was mentioned often actually in our online survey. And it also included establishing annual maintenance budget and making sure that it increases 10% annually. And then, of course, adding more pickleball courts. And then we also had program priority projects. And these were again created to align with the themes and responses that were gathered during the community engagement process. And these projects continue to strengthen, or these projects, one of the projects includes continuing to strengthen partnerships with various local organizations and agencies like the YMCA, Ruth Eckerd Hall, schools, local businesses, increasing promotion of events, continuing to pursue programs like Pennies for Pinellas and grant dollars, and of course, adopting this master plan update and including projects in the capital improvement plan.
And Isabella, I just want to add that some of these things the city is already working on. So signage, increasing pickleball courts are some examples of things that are already underway. So so you'll see some of that in here as well.
Exactly. Thank you, Andrea. And so these projects, they directly reflect previous recommendations, including electrification of parks and recreation, parks and recreation, increasing the number of park attendants, promoting intergenerational programming, and increasing tree canopy. So you can see the recommendations basically turn into projects. And so now I'm going to hand it off to Christine. She's going to go over the Historical Preservation, Arts, and Culture Report and how it supplements the Parks and Recreation Master Plan update.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Dalton, and I'm really excited about the work on this part of the report. I originally am a New Yorker, so I come from a city that has great parks and a lot of history. And going into that, I knew that Clearwater was a city that had a deep history with its parks, and actually the parks in Clearwater have really defined a lot of the city's development, is what I found when I really got into the research. Isabella, if you could go to the next slide. Yep. So the report that I put together actually has a historical narrative that talks about the development of Clearwater's parks. I had a lot of fun going through historic Sanborn maps and actually going map by map, page by page, and finding the first instances of parks in Clearwater. I've actually outlined that starting with the 1909 map of Clearwater and moving forward. And so it's interesting to see the evolution of some of the parks, how some of the parks started with, a smaller plot of land and grew, or they were, different uses, and over time they've evolved. But a number of your existing parks have been around basically since the beginning. Little trivia here for those of you who may not know, your oldest park is actually a neighborhood park, Plaza Park, and the land for that park was first acquired in 1909. So that just tells you how deep this history of parks goes back in Clearwater. It was really neat to see also how the theme of outdoor recreation is just this Clearwater thread through and through. So things like golf, and of course it's Florida, you're a coastal community, outdoor recreation makes a lot of sense. But I've worked with a lot of Florida communities, and I feel like in Clearwater, that was just a very, very strong thread in Clearwater's history. So the historical narrative gets a bit into that. We talk about tourism in Florida and how Clearwater fit into that. Went into the Sanborn map findings, talk a little bit about Plaza Park. Your former Clearwater athletic fields was a pretty important site in Clearwater. Jack Russell Stadium, your country club, the Clearwater Lawn Bowling and Shuffleboard clubs. And actually, on that, the lawn bowling and shuffleboard clubs, and actually the complex there, as a preservationist, I was over the top excited, because while some might look at those facilities and think they're kind of dated and they're due for an upgrade, they are these wonderful time capsules that when you all do get to the point where you want to do some upgrading and improvements to those facilities, you have so much historic to work with that you could capitalize upon. That for me, it was exciting. And I also wanted to say that whoever is maintaining those facilities is doing an amazing job. To have a resource like that, you know, these buildings are older, and to have them in such great condition and functioning so well is pretty amazing. So that was very exciting. One of the things that I looked at was the historic significance of the Plum House. I knew just by looking at the building on my initial site visit that it was going to be significant because of the architecture. You don't have a lot of buildings in Clearwater that date to this time period, the late 19th century. And once I started really digging into it, the house itself just has a really neat history. It's been moved twice. It has a significant association with the Plum family, hence the name, the Plum House. And I was looking at that as well as a real asset for your community. And you know, I feel like the work that I was doing and looking at is all things that are timely, because with the Plum House, you know, when we look at this building, we see that it's vacant right now. It is in a state of somewhat deterioration. So there's got to be consideration going on right now of what to do with this building. So being able to look at the historical significance of that building was very important. Can you go back one slide, Isabella? Let me just make sure I'm not missing. Yes, of course. One thing that really did very much excite me going through these parks was you have great opportunity to educate visitors in your parks through not wayfinding, but heritage markers. So signage that actually, you know, this image right here is a perfect example. There's so many vintage postcards and so many scenes of Clearwater's parks that, you know, that kind of thing is interesting to people. So I kept envisioning people walking through your parks and having a display panel that has that, you know, vintage photograph or vintage postcard telling the history of Clearwater's parks and their development. So you have a really great opportunity from an educational perspective to talk about Clearwater's history using the parks as the platform to do that. So I did provide some examples of different kinds of projects. One idea that popped into my head was actually, you know, you're such a tourist-driven community, to have postcards and note cards recreated of these old vintage postcards and actually sell them at concessions, and perhaps even to private shops in and around there, because your tourists are coming and they love that old vintage kind of thing. So I did make recommendations for grant funding on a number of things, one of which, like I said, I really do think the lawn bowling and shuffleboard complex is just this gem that really should be capitalized upon. And it's the one site that I visited that I felt just so strongly about this potential for intergenerational programming. Because what we're seeing in historic preservation is the younger generation is dying for authenticity. They are seeking out experiences that they've never had before, and they have this nostalgia for a time period that came before them. So and they're seeking that out in many different ways, you know, from seeking it out through travel, educational endeavors, but they're seeking it out in sport too. So we're seeing a real resurgence in Florida of, you know, reviving shuffleboard clubs and lawn bowling clubs and things of that nature, and young people really getting involved in that. So that was another thing about that site that really excited me. Isabella, can you go on to the next? And then the other thing that I looked at in your parks was the opportunity for public art. And again, Clearwater is already hitting it out of the park with many things. I discovered in my research that you have some really amazing public art initiatives, and Clearwater is already taking the arts and culture very seriously, which is wonderful. You've got some existing programs and organizations that are very strong in this area. And the one thing that I saw that is actually would be a great enhancement to existing public art is very low cost, and that would be to put exhibit labels at your art and maybe some interpretive panels. So this image here is in Coachman Park. And this is actually just a very well done public art display. So there's a great opportunity to put an interpretive panel out there actually describing what the artist's intent was. For those of you who don't know, those are torches are to kind of pay homage to the history of Clearwater Gas Company, which dates back to 1924. So even these here, even though it's modern public art, there's a historical aspect to it. So that was exciting to see that you all are already doing things great, but there is an opportunity, like I said, to put exhibit panels out at your public art. And the other opportunity that I would highly recommend that you all look at is doing an inventory of any and all public art, monuments, things of that nature in your park to see what could be capitalized upon and what could be utilized as an educational tool for your visitors. That's what I have.
Thanks, Christine, and thank you everyone that attended for sharing your time with us. And it's been a privilege for me and everyone on the team to work on this plan and to get to work, with the city and residents of Clearwater and get to know the city. And we hope we created an updated plan that helps an already great parks and recreation system as we learn grow even stronger. And that the plan reflects the values and the vision of the city. The process has been really informed by the public, and we thank the public too for being so engaged. And hopefully, and the plan reflects all the many wonderful comments and feedback that we received throughout the process. Being said, the plan is in its final stages, as Andrea explained in the beginning, and the process is being finalized, which will happen in January. And now that we had a chance, to present the final plan, we did want to allow space to ask questions about what we just presented, address any thoughts, concerns, or comments. And with that, take the opportunity to open up the floor if anyone had anything they'd like to share. Thank you again for joining us.
Let's let this author out. Listen, I'm late for comments on that project in the book.
Isabella, do you want to maybe stop sharing your screen and
There you go.
you can see the people. We're happy to, you can unmute or raise your hand or put a comment in the chat if you'd like.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Well, first, thanks for a great presentation. I'm currently up in Western Mass, but I spent time in Clearwater and I've been kind of going back and forth. Anyhow, and I've really been enjoying the parks lately and have seen such a big difference from what has been going on the past couple years to say like from 20 years ago. So it was a little while ago. And so I just want to thank everybody for having things like there was bathrooms and everything was very well maintained. And I want to say too, that even though there's problems everywhere with different like litters and stuff like that, that I also was very impressed by just how clean the beaches were and the access to trash cans. And there's on Sand Key, there's like baskets and stuff. And it's just, I thought that was just such a great idea. And so I just want to give kudos to everybody who's been working hard on that stuff. And then if I can be a part of doing something when I'm down there, then I'm going to be contacting people. So I like community gardens and soil regeneration because we need soil, and plus just being able to grow things and have families and kids and people involved, all ages, because you know, who doesn't love gardens and bumblebees and butterflies and stuff. So anyhow, that's it. I just wanted to say hi and let people see me and stuff like that. So
Thank you.
whoops.
One of the, we had so many interesting conversations with people in all of the parks that we visited. And one of the things that really struck me is the way that I heard several things about dogs bringing people together. So people go to the park to walk their dogs or just enjoy a stroll, and they start to talk with someone else who has a dog and get to know their neighbors that they maybe didn't know before. And um, I think it's so interesting the way that different activities that parks contain, whether they're passive, like walking your dog or having a picnic or just sitting on a bench and reading a book, or active, like playing a sport, whether it's a scheduled league sort of game or just a pickup soccer game. They sort of bring people together. They introduce neighbors to each other. They really create a sense of ownership in different neighborhoods and belonging. And through our analysis, one of the things that we looked at that Isabella touched on is the geographic distribution of parks. And it's important that everyone within a community have reasonable access to parks and open space and recreational facilities. And we found that all of the facilities and parks in the city are really well distributed. So most people throughout the city have pretty easy direct access to different kinds of parks. Bigger parks, smaller neighborhood parks, playgrounds, passive parks, recreation centers. So that's something that Clearwater, the city, has clearly put a lot of thought into the way that it prioritizes investments and distributes resources. And we found that that's a real strength of the city's parks and recreation system and department.
I just was gonna ask, where is Plum House? Is that in the Bellevue neighborhood? Is that at Lake Bellevue?
It's
It's
at, oh,
at
go
Sea
ahead.
Wright Park. At Sea Wright Park.
Oh, okay. That was my big question. I was like, yeah, where is, because there is, yeah, I just think that these are great places to have, you know, some kind of gatherings, you know, maybe to have a you know, some kind of a like a farmer's market type thing, you know, at different places. And also, you know, what was great was what I love too are the machines, the greenfield machines. What the situated at some of the parks are these like machines you can get in and like exercise on them. And this is like fantastic. And I met so many people really just by walking and going on the machines, and then just a lot of walking. And it's amazing how many people you do get to meet. And I think my favorite park right now is Eagle Lake Park. So I'm like, I really love that park. So anyhow.
Why is that your
Okay.
favorite one right now?
Well, because it's the easiest one for me to get to, and I don't think I've seen it when it's really in full bloom yet, because you know, I don't really get to pick right now exactly the times I come there, but there's just so much more to see at that park. But yeah, I just figure I'm just gonna hit them all, you know, and go to all of them. Yeah.
One thing that Andrea and I were talking about, and you really got a sense of this, is how the neighborhood parks, if you really want to get a feel for the neighborhood, just go to the park for a little while. We actually went over to what's known as Cherry Harris Park. Locals know it as the Marshall Street Park because they grew up with it being named the Marshall Street Park. But that was a really neat park because it took Andrea and I, 2 minutes, Andrea, before we were hearing stories about the neighborhood that went back decades, and talking to people who had lived in that neighborhood their whole lives. So that was one of the really interesting things, especially about the smaller neighborhood parks, to see how much they are a part of the neighborhood identity of each neighborhood that they're in. So that was kind of neat. One of the things I had in my recommendation section of the report is to consider looking at doing actual birthday parties for the parks. Some of these parks are really historic, so let's find out when the park opening date was and give it its 100th birthday party. I think that would be a fun event for residents and visitors actually to come out and mobilize around. And who doesn't like a party? And I think it would be really neat to honor some of these parks, especially these older ones, with a birthday party.
I think I recall that the first wooden bridge that connected to the beaches was 1924. So that connection should be having its 100th birthday coming up.
Yep, right around the corner. And there's a couple of milestones coming up. 1924 was also when the lawn bowls and shuffleboard clubs began. So of course the facility they're in right now does not date back to the 20s. They actually relocated from the prior facility, but their clubs are nearing their 100th anniversary. So that's another opportunity. I think for that would just be a lot of fun to see an event with food trucks, and maybe being able to have beer, wine, and do a 1920s party perhaps, or even a kind of Mad Men era mid-century, because the facility that they're at, that's the exciting part of it, is that everything is mid-century and intact. I mean, they even have board games in that building that are original board games that were out there, so that's really cool. The furniture is original. It's just such a time capsule. But yeah, there are a couple of different milestones that are coming up.
Something else that we learned a lot about and is reflected in the plan is the long history of the city with the Phillies, and the partnerships and the way that resources are shared and promoted, and the support that the city provides the organization provides the city. It really draws both sports professionals, but also just sports enthusiasts for a variety of things related to baseball and sports, both professional and minor league and training. So I think that in the plan we talk about continuing partnerships, and that's a really important one to continue, and relationship to highlight. One of the things that came out of conversations was how important it is to have not just parks where people can go, but safe, easy ways for people to get there on foot or by bike, because a lot of people use parks as outdoor recreation, and the journey to them is just as much fun as what happens once they get there. So those trails, sidewalk connectivity, bike lanes, those sorts of things were things that people highlighted as being important, particularly to those baseball fields.
Yeah, and researching that, the baseball theme, that's something that is really just a strong theme in Clearwater Park's history, of course. With the Phillies, I see a Phillies hat there. I think that's a Phillies hat. I'm not into ball, but I did learn a lot about baseball in doing this project. The spring training base for not just the Phillies, but prior to that, the Brooklyn Dodgers, before they were even named the Brooklyn Dodgers. And also during a very exciting time for baseball, when baseball was really just that totally just loved American pastime. So Clearwater has that tie into just this kind of very Americana, nostalgic kind of time period with the baseball history there too. And the golf history too, which it's, by the way, on Florida's historical golf trail. So one of only 50 sites in the state that are on the golf trail. So that golf history is pretty cool over at the country club.
The city really has something for everybody in terms of interests and activities and the kinds of spaces that allow for, you know, wild, raucous sort of sports and birthday parties to quiet contemplation, to exercise. And we really were thrilled to find how and hear from residents and visitors how easy it was to find what they were looking for within the city, and that the city's facilities also are an attractor to people from outside the city. And that can be important too, because when people from outside the city come, they're also more likely to shop at local stores and dine at local restaurants and see other parts of Clearwater that will hopefully spark an interest, whether it's downtown or some of the great neighborhoods. There's a variety of things, organized activities for youth as well as older adults. And as you can see, we talked about everything from basketball to pickleball to shuffleboard to dog parks. And Coachman Park is just such a fantastic facility, drawing national headlining acts and music and comedy, and it's a destination park that I think that the community can be so proud of and will attract people from around the state and around the country. So all of these things are reflected in the plan. We are still taking comments, and so are happy to talk further now. Either if you want to unmute yourself or put something in the chat, but also things can be submitted to the city through the website that we can that we'll consider as we finalize everything. We are coming up against 7 o'clock, so I wanted to see if there was any other comments, questions, thoughts, stories. Part of the strength of this plan is the history and the stories that have come out of our conversations and interactions with you. So we really appreciate those, and we would love to hear more if you have them.
Hey there. I just want to say that one of the things about the parks, first of all, I raised my son there for probably more than 10 years, so it's nostalgic to me. But the way that the parks, it's a very healing place, and people are super. I just was really impressed about how kind and nice people were. And it is true that every little park and bigger parks have their own like flavor, I guess you could say, or their own culture. And so it was very healing for me to go to these different places and be able to be welcomed and just have a really healing and beautiful experience, actually. So, yeah.
Thanks
Very
for
nice.
sharing that.
Good job. Thanks.
That's a great test. Based on all of our conversations with city staff, that's why they do what they do, to serve the community. Well, this meeting was recorded as we mentioned at the top of the hour. It will be posted to the city's website tomorrow. You'll be able to get updates to anything related to this plan. And also, by the way, the city has a wonderful website that has information on all the parks and programs and facilities, as well as other things that that the city is doing that you may find interesting. So I encourage you to check out the website and share this information with your neighbors. Again, we appreciate all of the input that we've received to date, and I hope that this community-driven plan is something that the whole community can be proud of going forward. So I think with that, we will end the meeting. Again, we really appreciate your time, and we will hopefully have an opportunity to talk soon. Thanks, everybody.